The Confederation observation deck fell silent as the human warship stabilized its position. Captain Jessica Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, her uniform singed and her expression resolute. Through the view screen, she observed alien vessels unlike anything humanity had ever encountered, sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light itself. "Damage report," Hayes called, her voice steady despite the chaos of the past hour. Lieutenant Commander Michael Rivera's fingers danced across his console. Main propulsion at 63%. Weapons systems operational but cooling circuits compromised. Life support stable. He glanced up, a hint of grim humor in his eyes. "Could be worse, Captain. We could have ended up in deep space instead of wherever this is." "Shields?" Hayes asked, moving to the tactical station. "Regenerating, but slowly," Security Chief Marcus Taylor responded, his broad shoulders tense as he monitored the approaching alien vessels. "Whatever that wormhole did, it reconfigured our shield harmonics. Engineering's working on it. But we're sitting ducks if those ships decide we're hostile," Hayes finished. She straightened her jacket and made a decision. "Open a channel. All frequencies, basic greeting protocols." Communications Officer Zoe Washington shook her head. "Captain, I'm detecting no radio transmissions, no standard electromagnetic communications at all. These ships appear to be communicating through something else." Outside, the crystal ships arranged themselves in a perfect hexagonal pattern around the Defiance. No threatening movements, but no welcoming gestures either. Just precise, mathematical positioning that spoke of advanced coordination. "They're scanning us," Rivera reported. "Like nothing I've ever seen. It's passing through our shields as if they weren't there." Hayes felt the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. First contact scenario. No preparation, no backup, and a damaged ship. The diplomatic playbook was clear. Demonstrate peaceful intentions while maintaining defensive readiness. Power down weapons systems but keep them on standby. "Shields at maximum," she ordered. "Let's not appear threatening, but I'm not surrendering our only defenses." The main view screen flickered, and an alien face appeared, vaguely humanoid, but with proportions that triggered an instinctive uncanny valley response. Its skin was pale blue with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with its breathing. When it spoke, its mouth didn't move. Instead, the words appeared directly in the minds of the bridge crew, causing several officers to flinch. "Unidentified vessel, you have violated Confederation secure space. Your technology is unregistered. Your species is unrecognized. Explain your presence or be neutralized." Hayes stepped forward, shoulders squared. "I am Captain Jessica Hayes of the United Nations ship Defiance. We are explorers from Earth who were pulled through a spatial anomaly against our will. We mean no harm and seek peaceful contact." The alien's eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle, blinked in sequence. "Primitive verbal communication. Inefficient. Your neural architecture suggests limited telepathic capacity." "Fascinating." From the science station, Dr. Eleanor Wells spoke quietly. "Captain, I believe they're surprised we can't communicate telepathically. Their technology readings suggest a civilization centuries beyond ours." Hayes nodded slightly. "Then let's show them humans have other strengths." She addressed the alien directly. "We may communicate differently, but we come with respect and curiosity. We request assistance and information while we repair our vessel." The alien conferred silently with others off-screen, its patterns shifting rapidly. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Olivia Rodriguez arrived on the bridge, her uniform stained with coolant fluid. "Captain," she said quietly, "that scan they performed, it's damaged our sensor array. They didn't just look at us, they looked through us." Before Hayes could respond, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Taylor's hands flew across his console, multiple objects approaching from the stern. Not from the alien fleet, somewhere else. The view screen split to show a dozen dark, barbed vessels emerging from what appeared to be folded space, a technology even the Confederation ships seemed unprepared for. Their design evoked predatory sea creatures, all angles and threatening protrusions. The telepathic voice returned, now urgent. The Voidborn attack. Your arrival has drawn them. Primitive vessel, you are now involved in a conflict beyond your understanding. Hayes' response was instant. Battle stations. All hands prepare for combat maneuvers. Let's show these Voidborn what primitive humans can do. The Council Chamber's geometric perfection made Lieutenant Commander Mason Wallace uncomfortable. 12 different species arranged in concentric circles, their representatives seated according to some mathematical principle he couldn't grasp. The humans, Wallace, Captain Hayes, and Security Chief Taylor, stood in the center like specimens under examination. The chamber hummed with telepathic conversation, waves of it washing over the humans without penetrating. Wallace observed micro-expressions passing across alien faces, flared membranes, changing skin patterns, subtle eye movements. He might not hear their thoughts, but his anthropological training helped him read their reactions. "They're talking about us," he murmured to Hayes. "And they don't think much of our chances." The Grand Arbiter, a willowy being with crystalline growths along its elongated skull, finally addressed them directly. "The Voidborn incursion has been temporarily repelled," it announced, its telepathic voice resonating in their minds. "Your vessels. Unconventional maneuvers created sufficient confusion to allow our defense grid to activate." "Thank you for your assistance," Hayes replied diplomatically. "We're grateful for the protection of your fleet." The Arbiter's head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. "Your gratitude is unnecessary. Your vessel was simply a random variable that temporarily disrupted Voidborn attack patterns." It gestured to a holographic display showing the battle. "Our tactical advisors have already identified and compensated for your interference. Future engagements will proceed according to established protocols." Wallace caught the dismissal in those words. Established protocols that didn't include humans. He stepped forward slightly. Perhaps a mutual exchange of tactical information would benefit both our peoples. The Voidborn seemed unprepared for our approach. A ripple of something like amusement passed through the chamber. A stout, amphibious delegate with overlapping gill plates spoke next. "Your species lacks neural augmentation, psychic development, and appears to rely on verbal communication, supplemented by crude body language. What tactical insights could you possibly offer to civilizations that have fought the Voidborn for 50,000 cycles?" Wallace recognized classic xenophotic dismissal, the same pattern that had played out countless times in Earth's history when technologically advanced societies encountered those they deemed primitive. With respect, he said carefully, "Sometimes fresh perspectives reveal blind spots in established thinking. The Voidborn clearly expected your responses, which suggests a stalemate rather than progress." The chamber fell silent, the telepathic background noise vanishing so abruptly that Wallace felt suddenly lightheaded. He had struck a nerve. The Arbiter's expression hardened. "This council session is adjourned for nutritional replenishment. The human representatives will attend the diplomatic reception in the Harmonic Hall. Their security status remains provisional." As the delegates filed out, Taylor leaned close to Hayes. Translation: "We embarrassed them by helping, and now they're going to make us sit through the alien equivalent of a cocktail party while they decide what to do with us." "Then we'll make the most of it," Hayes replied. "Wallace, learn everything you can. Taylor, stay alert. Something tells me not everyone here is pleased by our arrival." The Harmonic Hall lived up to its name. A vast chamber where crystalline formations resonated with tones just at the edge of human hearing. The effect was subtly disorienting. Confederation representatives clustered in species groups, their telepathic conversations creating an exclusionary atmosphere. "They've been at war so long they've forgotten how to change," Wallace observed, accepting a luminescent beverage from a hovering service drone. "Their tactics, their diplomacy, even their social structures, all locked in patterns." Hayes was about to respond when the lighting shifted subtly. Taylor tensed beside her, his hand moving toward the ceremonial sidearm the Confederation had reluctantly allowed him to keep. "Movement at the northwest entrance," he whispered, "not matching any delegation patterns I've observed." 3 figures entered, sleek, dark forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Unlike the Confederation species, they moved with predatory purpose. "Voidborn," Hayes breathed, recognition immediate though she'd only seen them from a view screen. Before she could alert the Confederation security, the infiltrators attacked, not with weapons, but with some form of psychic assault that dropped nearby delegates to the floor, contorting in silent agony. Taylor reacted instantly, drawing his primitive projectile weapon, while Wallace overturned a massive crystalline table, creating cover. Hayes grabbed a decorative staff from a wall display, instinctively testing its weight and balance. The Voidborn assassins hesitated, clearly surprised by the humans' immediate, coordinated response, a crucial second of delay that would prove to be their undoing. The Defiance hung in formation alongside 7 Confederation vessels, their crystalline hulls gleaming against the backdrop of a violet nebula. On the bridge, Captain Hayes studied the tactical display with narrowed eyes. "They're treating us like a liability," she observed as Lieutenant Commander Rivera outlined the patrol route they'd been assigned. "We're positioned at the rear of the formation," Rivera confirmed. "The Confederation commander has instructed us to maintain position and observe only." Hayes smiled thinly. Funny how quickly they forgot who saved their diplomats from those Voidborn assassins. The diplomatic fallout from the attack had been minimal. The Confederation simply couldn't comprehend how 3 humans with primitive weapons had neutralized infiltrators that bypassed their most sophisticated security measures. Security Chief Taylor's explanation about muscle memory and combat instincts had been dismissed as quaint biological adaptations. "Incoming transmission from the Confederation flagship," Communications Officer Washington announced. The stern face of Commander Nex Very appeared on screen, its translucent skin revealing the pulsing neural network beneath. "Human vessel, maintain your current position. Our sensors detect anomalous energy signatures ahead. We will investigate according to established protocols." "Acknowledged," Hayes responded, then muted the channel. "What are we picking up, Science Officer Wells?" Dr. Wells frowned at her readings. "Difficult to interpret through all the nebula interference, but there's definitely something unusual out there. Multiple signatures, moving in what appears to be." She paused. "Captain, these movement patterns match old Earth naval strategies, specifically submarine wolfpack tactics." Hayes stiffened. "They're walking into an ambush." Open channel to Commander Nex Very. "Channel open. Commander, we're detecting a potential ambush formation ahead. Request permission to share our tactical assessment." Nex Very's expression didn't change. "Your sensor technology is several generations behind ours. Remain in position. Confederation vessels, advance in temporal harmonic formation delta." The channel closed abruptly. "Arrogant fool," Taylor muttered. Hayes watched as the Confederation ships rearranged themselves into a mathematically perfect pattern, their movements precise and predictable. And exactly what an ambush would expect. "All hands, battle stations," she ordered quietly. "Chief Engineer Rodriguez, I need everything you can give me on the maneuvering thrusters." "Already diverting power, Captain." Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. "But what exactly are you planning to do against the Confederation's explicit orders?" "Save their lives," Hayes replied as the tactical display lit up with a dozen Voidborn warships emerging from the nebula's depths. The trap was sprung perfectly, surrounding the Confederation formation. The Voidborn attack came with devastating precision, energy weapons slicing through the Confederation's defensive screens as if they'd calculated the exact harmonics needed to penetrate them. "They've studied their enemy too well," Rivera observed grimly. "The Confederation's perfect formation makes them perfectly predictable." "Then let's be unpredictable," Hayes replied. "Helm, cut main engines, thrusters only. I want controlled tumble, minimal profile. Make us look damaged." The helmsman's fingers danced across the controls. "Controlled tumble initiated, Captain. We'll look like we're dead in space." As the Defiance spun and drifted, apparently crippled, the Voidborn ignored them, focusing on the more significant Confederation vessels. Hayes watched the battle unfold, counting seconds in her head. "Now," she ordered, "full power to forward shields, engines to maximum. Target the rear guard of the Voidborn fleet and execute attack pattern Sparrow." The Defiance surged forward, shooting through the gap between two Voidborn destroyers that never expected an attack from what appeared to be a disabled vessel. The human warship rolled as it passed between them, weapon ports opening to deliver devastating broadside attacks against shields configured for frontal assault. Alarms blared on the Voidborn vessels as they registered this unexpected threat. Their perfect formation began to break as three ships turned to engage the Defiance, creating gaps in their encirclement of the Confederation fleet. "Message from Commander Nexveri," Washington called out. "They're demanding to know what we're doing." Hayes smiled grimly as she watched the tactical display. The Confederation vessels were already exploiting the openings the Defiance had created, their initial confusion giving way to rapid adaptation. "Tell them we're introducing a little chaos to the equation," she replied. "And remind them that sometimes the most elegant solution is simply to do what your enemy believes impossible." The message arrived during the third watch, encrypted in a format that the Confederation's translators couldn't decipher. Lieutenant Zoe Washington brought it directly to Captain Hayes' quarters, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "It bypassed all standard communication protocols," Washington explained as Hayes examined the strange, shifting symbols on the datapad. "But it's definitely addressed to the Defiance specifically." Hayes nodded slowly. "Get Wallace and Rodriguez here. This looks deliberate, not random." Within minutes, Lieutenant Commander Wallace and Chief Engineer Rodriguez gathered around the holographic display, watching as the symbols rearranged themselves in seemingly random patterns. "It's testing our systems," Rodriguez observed, her fingers hovering over the display, "probing for compatible communication protocols." Wallace leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "No, it's more than that. The repetition isn't random." He tapped several symbols in sequence. "This pattern appears every 17th cycle. It's a primer, like the old SETI messages from Earth's early space age, establishing basic mathematical constants as a foundation for communication." Hayes watched as Wallace worked, his anthropological training proving surprisingly useful for alien linguistics. After 20 minutes, he had established rudimentary communication protocols. "It's an invitation," he announced finally, "from something called the Drift Clans. They want to meet us at coordinates outside Confederation space." The Confederation delegates mentioned the Drift Clans during the council session, Hayes recalled. "Dismissed them as nomadic degenerates who rejected civilized structure." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Anyone the Confederation looks down on this much might be worth talking to." Hayes made her decision. "Set course for the coordinates, but keep our approach cautious. The Confederation won't approve of this detour." "The Confederation doesn't approve of anything we do," Wallace said with a slight smile. "That's becoming our most reliable metric for good decisions." 36 hours later, the Defiance approached an asteroid field at the edge of a binary star system. Scans revealed the asteroids had been subtly modified: hollow chambers, interconnecting tunnels, and minimal power signatures carefully shielded from detection. "Ingenious," Rodriguez murmured, studying the sensor readings. "They're using the asteroid field itself as both habitat and defense system. Any pursuing ships would have to navigate a natural minefield to reach them." A small craft emerged from between two spinning asteroids, its design unlike either Confederation or Voidborn vessels. Organic curves blended with mechanical precision, utilizing materials that seemed to absorb rather than reflect scanner waves. "Receiving transmission," Washington announced. "Audio only." "Human vessel," a gravelly voice spoke in accented but understandable English. "Follow closely. Deviation from our path will result in asteroid collisions. Your ship is welcome, your presence valued." Hayes exchanged glances with her officers. "How are they speaking our language?" They must have analyzed our communications during the battle, Wallace suggested. Quick learners. The Defiance followed the guide craft through a dizzying path between tumbling asteroids, eventually approaching a massive hollowed-out planetoid. Magnetic clamps secured the ship as they docked at a concealed bay. Their grading party consisted of 4 distinct species, none of which matched Confederation physiology. Their leader, Thrix, stood nearly 7 feet tall, with exoskeletal armor and compound eyes that refracted light in hypnotic patterns. Captain Hayes, Thrix said without introduction. Your battle against the Voidborn was observed. Unconventional. Effective. Precisely what this stagnant conflict needs. Hayes stepped forward. You seem to know a lot about us. We make it our business to know what the Confederation ignores. Thrix replied, mandibles clicking softly. They'd fought the same enemy for 50 millennia without victory. Do you know why? Enlighten us, Wallace said. Thrix gestured them deeper into the asteroid base, where holographic displays showed genetic sequences, neural patterns, and historical battle data. The Confederation believes perfection comes through standardization. For 50,000 years, they've bred for telepathic uniformity, neural efficiency, and predictable thought patterns. The Voidborn represent the opposite extreme, a hive mind that consumes individuality entirely. And where do humans fit into this? Hayes asked, already suspecting the answer. Thrix's compound eyes flickered with what might have been amusement. Nowhere. And that's precisely why you matter. Your neural patterns are chaotic, redundant, and beautifully inefficient. You think in ways neither the Confederation nor the Voidborn can predict because your minds evolved for adaptation rather than optimization. You're saying our greatest strength is our imperfection, Rodriguez said slowly. I'm saying, Thrix replied, that you might be the wild variable that breaks a 50,000-year stalemate. The Confederation engineering bay hummed with tension as Chief Engineer Olivia Rodriguez stood toe-to-toe with Commander Vex Lauren, the Confederation's most decorated systems architect. Around them, the Defiance's exposed engine core glowed with an uneasy mixture of human and alien technology. This integration violates 16 fundamental harmonic principles, Vex Lauren stated, its translucent fingers hovering over a holographic rendering of the ship's power distribution network. The resonance patterns are dangerously unpredictable. Rodriguez folded her arms. That's because you're trying to predict them. Our systems aren't designed for perfect stability. They're designed to adapt to changing conditions. Adaptation introduces variables. Variables introduce error, Vex Lauren countered. And sometimes errors reveal solutions no one thought to look for, Rodriguez replied, making an adjustment that sent cascading changes through the hologram. The power fluctuations stabilized, but not in the symmetrical pattern Vex Lauren expected. Instead, they found equilibrium through constantly shifting micro-adjustments. Across the ship, Lieutenant Commander Wallace sat in a sparse Confederation medical chamber as Dr. Carisvale, a renegade Confederation neuroscientist, analyzed his brain patterns. Fascinating, Carisvale murmured, its 4 eyes blinking asynchronously as it studied the neural imaging display. Your thought processes form no recognizable pattern according to Confederation metrics. Is that a problem? Wallace asked. For the Confederation, yes. For the war effort, perhaps not. Carisvale manipulated the display, highlighting sections of Wallace's prefrontal cortex. This area, what do you call it? The Imagination Center, colloquially, Wallace replied, where we conceptualize things that don't exist. Carisvale's skin flushed azure with excitement. The Confederation has spent millennia engineering this neural function out of our species. It introduces too many variables, they said, creates inefficiency in decision-making, and the ability to imagine what your enemy might do next. Wallace asked. Unnecessary with sufficient processing power to calculate all probable outcomes, Carisvale answered, then hesitated. At least, that was the consensus. Wallace leaned forward. But you disagree. I have questions, the scientist admitted. Our simulations have failed to predict void-borne strategies with increasing frequency in recent decades. They're adapting faster than our models can account for. While the Confederation remains stuck in its ways, Wallace concluded. The alarm sounded before Carisvel could respond, a piercing tone that resonated through the station's crystalline structure. Captain Hayes' voice came through the comm system. All Defiance personnel, report to the ship immediately. The research station at Nexus Point is under attack. We're the closest vessel. 20 minutes later, the Defiance hurled toward the embattled research station, its newly upgraded engines pushing well beyond Confederation safety parameters. On the bridge, Hayes studied the tactical display with Security Chief Taylor. 17 void-borne vessels against 3 Confederation defenders, Taylor reported grimly. The station's outer shields are already failing. What's so important about this research station? Hayes asked. According to Carisvel, it houses the Confederation's central neural database, the collected knowledge of 12 species over 50,000 years. Hayes' expression hardened. If the Voidborn capture that, they'll know every Confederation tactical response, every defense protocol, every contingency plan, Taylor finished. Lieutenant Rivera looked up from the operations console. Captain, Chief Engineer Rodriguez reports the new systems are functioning, but unstable. Power fluctuations throughout the ship. Weapons status online, but targeting systems are compromised by the integration issues. Computer estimates 60% accuracy at best. Hayes nodded slowly. So we have a ship that's falling apart, weapons that might not hit what we aim at, and we're outnumbered 17-1. She smiled tightly. Perfect. Perfect, Rivera echoed incredulously. The Voidborn run probability simulations before every attack, Hayes explained. Their models will show that no rational commander would engage with our disadvantages. So they won't expect us to attack at all, Taylor realized. Exactly. Hayes turned to the communications station. Lieutenant Washington, prepare a tight beam transmission to the Confederation defenders. Tell them to break formation on my mark and execute a minimum distance warp jump. I want them to appear to retreat. And then what? Rivera asked. Hayes' eyes gleamed with determination. Then we remind everyone why humanity survived on Earth, despite being surrounded by predators bigger, faster, and stronger than us. We don't play by the rules of probability. We change the game entirely. The Confederation War Council chamber fell silent as Captain Hayes finished her presentation. The holographic battle simulation hung in the air, showing the impossible maneuver the Defiance had executed to save the Nexus Point research station, a spiraling approach that used the ship's power fluctuations as a deliberate countermeasure against voidborne targeting systems. Supreme Commander Vextheller, the most decorated military mind in the Confederation, studied the simulation with all 4 of his eyes. Unprecedented, he admitted finally. The voidborne battle computers should have predicted and countered this approach. They tried to, Security Chief Taylor explained, stepping forward, but they based their predictions on how a Confederation ship would behave under stress. Our ship wasn't failing according to recognizable patterns. It was failing creatively. A ripple of something between amusement and discomfort passed through the assembled commanders. You propose we should emulate malfunction? Vextheller asked, the concept clearly disturbing him. Hayes shook her head. Not malfunction specifically. Unpredictability. The Voidborn have spent millennia studying your tactics, just as you've studied theirs. Both sides are locked in a dance where every step is calculated generations in advance. And you suggest we simply improvise? Another commander asked, the word sounding foreign in their telepathic communication. I suggest your crews learn to trust their instincts alongside their calculations, Hayes replied. To recognize when the perfect solution isn't working and try something imperfect instead. The debate raged for hours afterward, but the results of the Nexus Point battle couldn't be argued with. Reluctantly, the Confederation agreed to implement human training protocols for select ship crews. Meanwhile, deep in Drift Clan territory, Lieutenant Commander Wallace and Dr. Karis Vale made a breakthrough. They stood before a psionic amplifier, watching as Wallace's brain patterns disrupted the predictive algorithms the Voidborn used to anticipate Confederation movements. "It works," Karis Vale breathed, 4 eyes wide with excitement. "Your thought patterns introduce sufficient chaos to render their prediction models useless. But will it scale?" Wallace asked. "One human can't disrupt their entire network." Fricks of the Drift clans stepped forward from the shadows where he'd been observing. "Perhaps not, but we can use your neural pattern as a template to create artificial interference across multiple frequencies." The conversation was interrupted as Lieutenant Washington entered the chamber, her expression grim. "Emergency transmission from the Defiance," she reported. "Captain Hayes is requesting immediate return. The Confederation intercepted a Voidborn vessel carrying classified information. The Voidborn are building something called a psionic cascader." Karis Vale's skin paled to almost translucent. "Impossible. The theoretical research was abandoned as too dangerous even for warfare." "What does it do?" Wallace asked. "It would exploit the standardized neural patterns of all Confederation species," the scientist explained. "One activation, and every telepathic mind connected to the Confederation network would be instantly enslaved." "How many minds are we talking about?" Wallace pressed. "Trillions," Karis Vale whispered, "across 12 species and 37 star systems." 48 hours later, Captain Hayes stood before a joint council of Confederation leaders and Drift clan representatives. The evidence was irrefutable: intercepted communications, technical schematics, and confirmation from 3 separate intelligence sources. "The device is nearly operational," Hayes concluded. "Once activated, the Voidborn will control every telepathically linked mind in Confederation space." "There must be countermeasures," Supreme Commander Vex Thaler insisted. "Psionic shielding, neural dampeners, all based on the same standardized technology the Cascader is designed to exploit," Hayes countered. "Any defense you create will have the same vulnerabilities." "Then we are doomed," one of the council members stated flatly. "Not necessarily," Hayes replied. "The Cascader targets standardized neural patterns. Humans don't have them. Neither do the Drift clans, who have resisted Confederation neural standardization programs." Realization dawned on the council members' faces. "You're suggesting," Vex Thaler began. Hayes nodded. "A strike team of humans and Drift clan operatives. We're the only ones who can approach the device without being affected. The Defiance will lead the mission. A single ship against the heart of Voidborn territory." A council member objected. "The statistical probability of success is infinitesimal." "Good thing we don't rely on statistics," Hayes replied with a tight smile. "We rely on determination. And unlike your probability models, determination doesn't recognize impossible odds." The Defiance slipped through the quantum distortion field surrounding the Voidborn stronghold, its hull vibrating with the strain. In engineering, Chief Rodriguez monitored systems that operated well beyond their design parameters, kept functional only through constant manual adjustments. "Cloak holding at 73%, she reported through the comm. "The Drift clan modifications are working, but I can't guarantee for how long." On the bridge, Captain Hayes acknowledged the report with a nod. Beside her, Thrix of the Drift clans studied the sensor readings of the massive structure ahead. A sprawling installation built into the heart of a dead star, drawing power from the collapsed matter at its core. "We're detecting minimal defensive systems," Lieutenant Rivera observed. "Either they don't expect anyone to reach this far, or it's a trap," Security Chief Taylor finished, his expression grim. "The defenses are probably focused inward, not outward." Hayes turned to Lieutenant Commander Wallace, who had spent the journey studying everything they knew about Voidborn psychology, which wasn't much. "Your assessment?" "They're supremely confident," Wallace replied. "Their predictive models show no scenario where we could reach their central command. The very concept is outside their probability matrix." "Perfect," Hayes said with a tight smile. Prepare the strike teams. We move in 15 minutes. The insertion was executed with precision. 3 teams deployed to different sections of the installation. Hayes led Alpha Team toward the central control hub, with Wallace and Taylor at her side. Beta Team, led by Rodriguez, headed for the power core to plant explosives as a contingency. Gamma Team, composed of Drift Clan specialists, moved to secure their extraction route. As they penetrated deeper into the facility, the architecture became increasingly organic, pulsing membranes, flowing conduits that resembled veins, surfaces that seemed to breathe. "Not what I expected," Taylor muttered, his hand tight on his weapon. "It's designed to accommodate their true form," Wallace explained quietly. "What we've encountered before were just their combat shells." They reached a vast chamber where the walls were lined with transparent pods. Inside each floated a being unlike anything they had seen before, amorphous masses of neural tissue connected by glowing filaments. "My God," Hayes breathed. "What are we looking at?" Wallace approached one of the pods, studying the creature within. I think these are what remain of the minds they'd harvested. Consciousness extracted and preserved, kept alive but not aware." Before anyone could respond, the air around them shimmered. The human strike team felt a pressure against their minds, not the clean, precise telepathy of the Confederation, but something ancient and hungry, probing for entry points. "They're attacking psionically," Wallace warned, his voice trained. "Everyone, the mental shields. Remember your training." The pressure intensified, becoming almost physical. Around them, the environment began to shift and distort as the Voidborn attempted to infiltrate their perceptions. Hayes found herself suddenly standing in the ruins of Earth's orbital defense station, the site of her greatest failure years before, where her hesitation had cost the lives of 17 crew members. The memory was so vivid, she could smell the burning circuitry, hear the screams of the dying. "It's not real," she told herself, fighting through the illusion. "They're pulling this from my memories, my fears." Nearby, Security Chief Taylor faced his own nightmare, the botched hostage rescue that had haunted him for a decade. Wallace confronted the memory of his brother's death in the Mars colony collapse. "They're trying to paralyze us with our worst memories," Wallace called out, his voice echoing strangely in the psionic landscape. This is why the Confederation troops couldn't penetrate this far. Their standardized minds gave these entities perfect access to their fears. Hayes forced herself to move forward, each step requiring immense will. "Everyone focus on the mission. Our regrets are real, but they don't define us. They're part of us, but they're not all of us." As she pushed through her own nightmare, Hayes glimpsed the true enemy, not the physical Voidborn, but ancient consciousness predators that had evolved to feed on thought itself. They had no concept of individuality, no understanding of minds that could contain contradictions and still function. "They don't understand us," Hayes realized. "They can access our fears, but they can't comprehend how we continue despite them." The revelation spread through the team, creating a ripple effect in the psionic attack. The human capacity to acknowledge pain while still moving forward, to carry grief without being consumed by it, was something the Voidborn consciousness eaters had never encountered in their millennia of preying on other species. "We're almost there," Hayes called, seeing the central control chamber ahead. "Remember, we're not here despite our flaws and pain. We're here because of them. They made us who we are." The central chamber of the Voidborn command nexus pulsed with dark energy. At its center stood the psionic cascader, a towering structure of crystalline neural tissue and void metal, designed to enslave trillions of minds in an instant. "Charges set," Lieutenant Commander Wallace reported, securing the last explosive device. "But there's a problem. The fail-safes are more complex than we anticipated." Captain Hayes examined the control interface, a writhing mass of neural connections that seemed to anticipate their actions, shifting configurations whenever they got close. "It's adaptive," she realized. "Standard explosives won't work if it can reconfigure itself around the damage." Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. tense with urgency. "Captain, Beta Team has secured the power core, but we've encountered heavy resistance. The Voidborn are converging on our position. We can't hold much longer." A low, resonant vibration filled the chamber as the Cascader began powering up, its crystal components aligning into firing position. "They're activating it remotely," Security Chief Taylor warned, checking his tactical display. "We have minutes, maybe less." Hayes made a split-second decision. "Wallace, your research with Carisfail, the neural disruption pattern. Could we use the Cascader itself to broadcast it?" Wallace's eyes widened. "Theoretically, yes. Instead of sending a control signal, we could transmit the chaotic human neural pattern to every mind connected to the Voidborn network." "Do it," Hayes ordered, then activated her comm. "All teams, prepare for immediate extraction." Rodriguez set the core charges on a 2-minute timer. As Wallace worked furiously at the neural interface, Hayes defended their position, firing precise bursts at Voidborn drones that began pouring into the chamber. Taylor moved with mechanical efficiency, each shot finding its mark despite the disorienting psionic pressure that intensified around them. "Almost there," Wallace called, his fingers dancing across the interface as he uploaded the modified psionic pattern, a template based on human neural architecture, designed to introduce unpredictability and individual thought into the rigid Voidborn hive mind. "The system is fighting me, trying to reject the pattern." "Make it work," Hayes responded through gritted teeth, reloading her weapon as Taylor covered her. The Cascader's hum reached a fever pitch, crystal components spinning so rapidly they blurred. Warning lights flashed throughout the chamber as the Voidborn realized what the humans were attempting. "Uploading complete," Wallace announced finally. "When this activates, it's going to hit the entire Voidborn collective consciousness at once." "Extraction route is compromised," came Thrix's voice over the comm. "We're pinned down near Docking Bay 3. Alternate route through Maintenance Shaft 7, Hayes ordered. "Move, now." As they ran through the twisting corridors of the installation, the Cascader activated behind them, not with the enslaving signal the Voidborn had intended, but with Wallace's modified human neural pattern. The effect was instantaneous. Throughout the structure, Voidborn drones froze in place, their shared consciousness overwhelmed by the introduction of chaotic human thought patterns. "What's happening to them?" Taylor asked as they sprinted toward extraction. "Individuality," Wallace replied. "We've introduced the concept of independent thought into a hive mind that's existed for millennia. Imagine suddenly developing thousands of separate personalities after always being a single entity." The Defiance broke free of the installation, just as Rodriguez's charges detonated, the power core explosion sending shockwaves through the structure. But the real damage had already been done. Throughout Voidborn space, their consciousness network collapsed under the weight of newly awakened individual thought. 3 weeks later, Captain Hayes stood on the Confederation Council platform, addressing representatives from across the galaxy, including several former Voidborn who had emerged from the collective with individual identities intact. "We didn't just win a battle," she told them. "We forced an evolution. For 50,000 years, this conflict persisted because both sides engineered themselves into evolutionary corners, perfect order versus perfect unity, with no room for the beautiful chaos that drives growth." She gestured to the human crew standing beside her. "We didn't succeed because we were stronger or smarter. We succeeded because we remained adaptable, because we preserved the messy, inefficient aspects of our nature that you discarded in pursuit of perfection." The Supreme Commander of the Confederation stepped forward. "Captain Hayes, the Confederation wishes to formally establish diplomatic relations with Earth. We have much to learn from your species." Hayes smiled. "And we from yours. But perhaps the most important lesson is one we all need to remember. True advancement doesn't come from perfecting a single path, but from exploring countless imperfect ones."